Hi. Today what I'm going to take you through is the XMPRO solution development process. How do you approach and create your first event intelligence application? What steps do you go through and why do you go through those particular steps? From our perspective and how we address the particular solution that you're trying to put together is what problem are we solving with this particular application? So what's the key problem that we're looking to address with this? And that will lead us into the following steps that we will be going through. Step 1, designing real-time data streams using real-time data sources. What we mean by this is, where's my information coming from? For me to solve a particular problem, I need information. Where's my live feed coming from? Are we getting it from a historian? Are we getting it from a live feed or MQTT as an example? The second is, what type of analytics or calculations are we going to do on this data to help us identify some of the exceptions and the errors in it that we're looking for? And then the third, still within the data stream, is what output formatting and what type of action do we want to drive. So once we've identified some data that matches the particular event that we're looking for, what action do we want to drive with that? First step is data streams using real-time data sources. Step 2, this is where we go into creating some event rules, some recommendations. And again, here is, what is the rule logic for this going to look like? What type of thresholds do we want to set? How many rules do we want to actually put into that? The second is, do we want to offer some work instructions? So if a recommendation is triggered, how does someone actually go about resolving or reacting or responding to that recommendation? And then the third is, what other resources can we provide? A link to a schematic, a link to an engineering test procedure, maybe a video, etc. The third step is, this is where we create the event boards and the apps themselves. So here is where we'll lay out the actual event board, decide which piece of information we want where. But again, we're trying to answer a particular question. By displaying this information onto the screen, what does it mean and what are we actually showing? Easy access to some recommendations. How do I filter recommendations? I don't want to see everything. I just want to see what is particular to this event board that I'm creating. And lastly, you can also create some self-validating KPIs in your event board if you actually need to. So this is the whole process. Step 1, step 2, and step 3. So step 1, touching on data streams with real-time data sources. Step 2, event rules and recommendations. And then step 3, creating event boards and ultimately the apps as well. There is still change management and project and IT management, governance, etc. that flows through all three of these as well, so those are not forgotten. So what does this actually look like in practice? The particular problem is, I'm looking for a temperature condition on my pump. So we're monitoring for a temperature condition on my pump. So the first thing is data sources, real-time data sources through a data stream. So where do we actually do that? So we do that in the data stream designer, and we've got an example that'll come up on the screen here. What does that actually look like? So again, step 1, where's my data coming from? How do I get context, wrangle the data, create some analytics, particular calculations on it if I need to, format it, and then ultimately drive a particular action. So in this example that we've got here is, we're reading real-time data in from MQTT and creating context with Azure SQL. We're then performing some calculation and analytics in the middle, and ultimately on the far right, this is where we are outputting and integrating to output systems. In some subsequent videos, we'll actually go through and create this particular example. I'm just giving a holistic view here of the steps you need to go through for this particular process. So step 1 is done in the data stream designer, and this is where we create our data streams using real-time data sources to make this information available to recommendations and to make it available to the app designer as well. Step 2, this is where we start creating some of the event rules and recommendations, and we do this in the app designer. So again, if we just pull up a particular example here, we've created a recommendation for pump temperature, and we've just created one rule for that as well. So what rules and thresholds do we want to actually configure? What recommended actions, where do we do that, and how do we actually provide additional resources, videos, engineering test procedures, etc. Again, step 1 is to create a data stream. Step 2 is to create the event rules and recommendations. Step 1 is done in the data stream designer. Step 2 is done in the application designer, and that moves us on to step 3. Step 3 is we are creating event boards and the application. This is also done in the application designer, and if I pull an example of what does that actually look like here, there is a full interface that will walk you through how do you actually create your particular event boards. Again, what's the simplest way to display? There's various layouts, various controls for you to actually use to configure that. How do you limit and filter recommendations? In this instance, this is on a particular pump. We don't want recommendations for my entire assembly plant, my entire production line, my entire facility, so you can actually filter that information out from here as well. But also, if you want to, how do you continuously monitor health and process and KPIs as well from an event board perspective? If I come back to where we started, what problem are we solving? That is the thought process behind every single step 1, 2, and 3 as we're going through it. So step 1, designing data streams using real-time data sources. Step 2, we're creating event rules and recommendations. And then step 3 is where we touch event boards and ultimately the applications. Step 1 is done in the data stream designer. Step 2 is done in the application designer, and the same with step 3 right at the end to create your event boards. Thank you for attending and watching this video today. As I said, we've just touched on what is the step 1, 2, and 3 from our perspective on how to approach creating these. In subsequent videos, we'll go into a lot more detail into step 1, 2, and 3.